Well, we meet again. Pittsburgh Penguins will be facing off against the New York Islanders for the second time in 3 years in the first round of the playoffs. So, initial thoughts going into the series are fear, excitement, but also a bit of revenge. The last time these two teams faced off, I think we can all remember what happened. A little embarrassing, we don't need to go back on that. But there are going to be some huge factors, in my opinion, that are going to sway this series in a different direction this time around. First off, the Penguins have home ice advantage, and that will play hugely in their favor. Like I said in the previous video, this team was absolutely a wrecking force at home this season. Also, the Penguins are coming in pretty hot, whereas the Islanders, not so much. Obviously, at this point in the season, it doesn't matter as much, but if we look at trending directions, that can have an impact. The Penguins are also going to be coming into this with almost a 100% healthy lineup. All signs are pointing in the right direction, with Mike Matheson being on the ice with a full cage after just taking a puck in the face just 9 days ago. Guy's a beast. Lastly will be a sense of revenge. I think this Penguins team has a huge fire lit under them, which they did not have at all in 2019. Ever since Phil Kessel left the team, there's just been a bit of a different atmosphere. I can't really put a finger on it, to be honest with you, but something about the identity of this team has changed just slightly, and I think Phil Kessel not being a part of the lineup has actually helped more than I think a lot of fans realize. So we're going to first look at the team stats these two had with the shortened season. The stats might be a little skewed because they were only playing against teams in the East Division, but if anything, that gives us a more accurate representation of how these teams are going to play against each other come playoff time. So the Islanders finished 4th in the East Division with a record of 31, 17, and 6, which is still a really good record, and for that to only finish 4th in a division just tells you how strong this division really was. Penguins, on the other hand, finished 36, 16, and 3, which obviously won them the division, and is a pretty stellar record. Next two stats are going to be goals for and goals against, which against a team like the Islanders are going to be the stats that you're going to be looking forward the most. So let's start with the Penguins. The Penguins finished first in the NHL with goals for this season with 3.51 goals a game, which is a crazy number, but where they didn't finish as well was the goals against. They actually ended up having a 2.82 goals against average, which is actually a pretty bad average considering that gave them 17th in the league. And now for the Islanders, they finished the 2.81 goals for, which is the 19th best in the NHL. Not that great, but when you look at their goals against, which a 2.31 notched them second in the NHL, which is where we know where Barry Trotz, that's where his system comes into play, and that's their strength. And now I think a really big turning factor will be the special teams, and I think if we look at the Penguins' numbers just in the regular season, we can sort of see why this can be an impactful thing. Pittsburgh had a 23.7% power play, which was 4th best in the NHL. The Islanders' 17.82% power play was actually 21st in the NHL, which is not that great, but when you consider the fact that their penalty kill was 83.72%, the 6th best in the NHL, you sort of see more of the same picture here. And like with the goals for, goals against, the Penguins basically were a polar opposite of the Islanders. Their penalty kill was 26th in the NHL, with us being 77%, which is really bad. But again, looking at their power play, you sort of see where the strengths and weaknesses lie. I think if the Penguins can get their power play going, that'll be a huge difference maker. And honestly, it's a series winner. Now for the Islanders, their main priority is keeping the puck out of the net. If you can keep Crosby, Malkin, Jared McCann, Jake Gensel, Brian Rust, Chris Letang off the score sheet, then there's no way the Penguins can win the series. But I think that's why the power play will have such a big impact. When you take those 5-on-5 juggernauts off the ice and make them play shorthanded, you'll see the difference that will make in a series. Speaking of goals scoring, the Penguins had one really important goal scorer, and I don't really know if I need to say his name. Crosby had 62 points in the regular season, which was the team lead. He had 24 goals, 38 assists. Crazy numbers for the 33-year-old. For the Islanders, not so much. They had a bit of an even scoring field. Matt Barzal, 45 points in the season, but it was actually Brock Nelson who had the leading goals with 18. Surprising. and Nick Leddy with 29 assists. For the Islanders, their goaltenders were definitely a huge part of this team's success. Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov both played actually pretty well, considering that neither one of them had much of an expectation coming into the season. Semyon Varlamov finished with a 19-11-4 record with a .929 save percentage and a .204 goals against average. Gotta say, those are really good numbers from a goalie who no one really expected to play this well. For Ilya Sorokin, unproven Russian goaltender, finished with a 13-6-3 with a .918 save percentage and a 2.17 goals against. These two numbers are really good, and these two goalies played very well. Might just be a byproduct of the system. Same sort of thing happened to Robin Lehner, but then again, now he's playing, and he's playing some great hockey, so might just be the goaltenders getting confidence, and with a good system, can only have good things come out of that. For the Pittsburgh Penguins, on the other hand, Tristan Jarry, the man in the cage, most times finished with a 25-9-3 record, but he only had a .909 save percentage and a 2.75 goals against. Those aren't really that great of numbers, but considering where the Penguins' strength lies, it's not really a surprise to see their goaltender not having that great numbers, but when you see the record, it kind of gives you some hope. Going back in the defensive core, the Pittsburgh Penguins' defense this year looks completely different than the way it looked when they played against the Islanders last time. Penguins obviously have kept Dumoulin and Letang together, not really a shocker there, but the way these two have played this season have been phenomenal and a complete different look than how they did when they played against the Islanders last. Christopher Letang is having a borderline Norris candidate season. He led the team with plus-minus with a +19, and he was the leading points getter on the Penguins with +40 points. Crazy. I don't know where this season came from, but he definitely proved that he's still got great hockey within him. Brian Dumoulin has been named the best compliment to Christopher Letang, and it's not a surprise to see why. When the Penguins didn't have Brian Dumoulin in the lineup, they were 8-7-0. Not bad, but not great. But when he wasn't in the lineup, get this, Penguins were 29-9-3 with Brian Dumoulin in the lineup. Talk about underrated. Additionally, not a single defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins had a minus. That was probably the most surprising statistic I saw. A couple of the Islanders defensemen, namely Nick Leddy, who had the most assists on the team. Nick Leddy, who was a good offensive defenseman for the team, actually was a minus player. But jumping back to the Penguins blue line, the three new players that this last series didn't see, John Marino, Mike Matheson, and Cody Ceci. Now take these three out of the defense, and who do you have left? Got Christopher Letang, got Marcus Pettersson, and you have Brian Dumoulin. All three, recognizable Penguins names. But now when you factor in the three defensemen the Pittsburgh Penguins had instead of the three new guys, you got Eric Goodbranson, Jack Johnson, and Olli Mata. Yeah, that's going to be a yikes from me. All three of these names will send a shiver down all Pens fans, myself included. And when I looked back at the roster we played against the Islanders in 2019, I was baffled to see the players who were actually starting against this team. All things considered, the Penguins didn't have a bad team per se in 2019, but it's clear to see the team's weaknesses that were glaring, and all Pens fans were just screaming at their TVs when they were watching this team play. There was way too much grit on this team, and it was kind of confusing as to why. We got to give credit where credit is due. GM JR definitely did help rebrand the Penguins into becoming a speed team, albeit we sort of lost that identity a little bit when we ended up playing the Islanders the first time. But before he retired, the moves he made to bring in these new defensemen honestly have helped re-identify this Penguins blue line. And I think it's that speed on the blue line that's going to be a big impacting factor. We don't have sluggish Goodbranson, we don't have sluggish Johnson anymore, and sluggish Mata for that fact. We've got a speedy John Marino, we've got a surprisingly quick Cody Ceci, and a blazing Mike Matheson. These three guys are going to be vital to jumping in on any plays and making an impact from the blue line. And last but not least, I think the special teams, like I mentioned previously, are going to be probably the biggest turning point of this series. Last time these two teams played, the Penguins' power play really just was not clicking at all. And I had no words. The Penguins' power play was good that season, and it just sort of fizzled out in the playoffs. I think when you replace guys like Phil Kessel with Jared McCann, who's been on fire, you look at the reinvigorated Brian Rust, an all-star Sidney Crosby, Malkin hopefully finding his form again, Letang playing a great season, and Jake Gensel. When you look at those guys and you look at how Mike Sullivan has this plethora of great offensive talents, you just gotta hope he makes the right choice. The second unit also has some crazy tools too. Jeff Carter, I don't need to say much more on Jeff Carter. Jason Zucker, hopefully he can get going again. John Marino might have an impact. Mike Matheson as well. Hopefully Sully makes a good choice with shuffling these guys around to figure out what combination he's going to go with for power play 1, power play 2 come playoffs. And I think to wrap up this video, the main thing I want the Penguins to do this series is to really just play their game. When we played against the Islanders last time, they were all over us. They had their game and they were in our head, living there completely rent-free, tenancy agreement and everything. This time around with our fortress, I don't think that this will get penetrated as much as it did last time. I mean, can you really blame that 2019 Penguins team walking in to that Nassau Coliseum? It's overwhelming. I don't blame them, but they certainly should have played better. And I think this is the year that we have to get revenge on the Islanders and make a really strong playoff run. So that'll be all from me. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, let me know in the comments why and what you think I could do better. And subscribe if you're new. If you want to see more of this content, there'll be more coming your way. Thanks for watching, guys.